You know, this is a super cool place, by the way. I haven't been here before, but this is really cool. We need one of these in Logitech. And I loved your whole pitch just now. It makes me want to put somebody over here. I don't know if anybody at Logitech wants to come. I also want to thank Joseph. You know, Joseph is basically the president and executive director of Lee & Fung. It's two different companies now. And I'm super impressed by him and super impressed by the company.
Thank you.
I also want to thank all the Logitech people here. How many people are here from Logitech? Raise your hand. I hope I don't bore you to death. You've already heard most of this before. But maybe I'll say something different. I've never said it twice. Then I want to thank all of the rest of you for coming. So I'm going to go through. I'll go through this relatively quickly, but reinvention and the power of pairs is what this topic's about. And let's see what we got here. So we're going to do it first a little. First of all, I have to point out this is a Logitech presenter. We have an even more expensive one, better one if you're interested. Marco, I'll turn you on to that later.
I'll buy 3. We have 3.
Okay, we'll send you one. It'll be totally free. You'll infect other people. So a little bit about Logitech. So I actually joined Logitech 7 years ago, a little over 7 years ago, and I joined at a tough time, so we were kind of in trouble. And we made a bunch of changes, which I'll talk about in a minute. And when my first year there, I had an immediate impact, and those of you in Logitech will know this. Things got worse. So my first year went from, we were declining already, we declined even more. And as you can see, since then, we've gone from negative 7% to 2, 4, 9, 15, 13, and 10% last year. And then our profit also improved a lot. We actually lost $200 million the first year. It was partly a technical restructuring, but forgetting about that, we made $75 million, and as you can see, our profits have improved a lot since then. So a good story. In our stock price, this is updated through. This is an old presentation. It's updated through I think January, but the bottom line is our stock has gone up about 600 or 700% in the last 7 years, and so it's been a pretty good story. Now the question is, what did we do, and how did we end up there? Now, Joseph and I were just talking about design thinking. And how many people in here feel like they're a designer? Okay, well, I'll tell you, you all are. And we'll talk about that more later. But when I joined Logitech, we didn't have any designers in the company. But don't be fooled. We were already doing pretty good products with really good design. We just weren't, we were not a design company, though, under my definition, and we're still not under my definition. But when I joined, I had one mission, or two missions. One was to create a design company out of Logitech. Mission not accomplished yet. And the second was to make it a great company. And mission still not accomplished. The second mission, I'll talk more about that in a minute. The second goal was I was excited about the idea of joining a company with great technical capability that could serially enter new categories. Meaning every year or two, or maybe more than once a year, we could enter a new category and try to be successful. But to do that, it was obvious to me very early on that we couldn't do it with just the Logitech brand. Because there are categories where we would go into where Logitech would be fine, but we'd be competing with brands that had grown up in the space in that category, like the music category. We're competing with Bose or JBL, where we would need a different brand. We either would have to create one, license one, or buy one. And so our second goal here was to become a multi-category, multi-brand company. So we started down that path too. Now, a little bit of history, for those of you who don't know Logitech very well. From 1981 to 1998, we weren't a multi-category company, we were a one-category company. And the one category we were in was the mouse. So the mouse is our starting point. And I would usually make a little joke about Logitech. I would say it all started with a mouse. But that's to American audiences, because they know very well that Walt Disney always said it all started with a mouse. So I would say there's another company, but it all started with a mouse. And it did all start with a mouse for us. But, whoops, sorry. But in between 1998 and 2008, another thing happened, which was we started to enter new categories. So we surrounded the PC. Our first big new category move, really, was to enter the keyboard segment. And that, believe it or not, was a very risky move. It was debated for probably more than a decade before we finally made that decision. Now, there are two reasons why it took that long. One was things were good in the mouse business, so we were growing like crazy. And the second thing was we manufactured mice, so we felt like we had a competitive advantage. But keyboards we weren't going to manufacture. So we finally, and there's a reason for that. So we finally bit the bullet. We entered the keyboard business with a new technology, wirelessness, and then we began to surround the PC. And so we went from mice to keyboards to headsets to PC speakers to webcams. We really surrounded that PC, and we had this magical period, which was probably one of the most interesting and exciting runs that any company has ever had on the New York or the NASDAQ, a U.S. stock exchange, or on the Swiss stock exchange. We went almost 40 consecutive quarters where we grew double digits at the top line and double digits at the bottom line. And the reason we grew for so long and so strongly at both top and bottom has never been done before or since on those two exchanges. The reason we were successful is because we had three ways to grow. So if you're in business school now, if you're getting your MBA, this is worth remembering. The first way to grow was we were in a growing market. So the PC was expanding around the world. The second one was we were innovating very well. So we were gaining market share in those categories as we went. And the third one was we were entering new categories. So we were entering adjacencies. As I said, we were surrounding the PC. So we had this amazing run. And then things went wrong. First, the first reason we grew stopped growing and actually started to decline. So the growth of the PC went from growing to flatline to declining. So that huge wind at our back, if we were in a sailboat, blowing us forward, stopped and then went backwards, and we had a headwind. The second thing that happened was we started to focus on some areas of the business that probably weren't as innovative. I joked when I came in, and this is a terrible thing to say, but that we were too much into black plastic and we were too focused on the low end. And so when we did that, we lost some of our innovation mojo. And I think our engineering teams really felt that they wanted to be working on cool stuff, exciting new innovation, and even they felt like they weren't working as much as they should have been. And then the third one was, we were trying to enter new categories, but there was nothing left around the PC. So we tried new things. We tried to enter video conferencing. We tried to create a new category with Google. And those things just didn't work. And even worse, they didn't work, and we didn't manage the risk of them not working, because we weren't used to things not working. We were used to things working. You know, when you're going up and to the right for 10 years in a row, things work. So you try it and you assume they're going to work, and when they don't work, if you don't manage the risk, you're in trouble. So we were in trouble. And that's when I was lucky for me, because I got to join. So we changed a few things. The first that we changed, I already talked about. We wanted to be a design company. So what does that mean? That means if you really want to be a design company, you better have design principles. So we started out, and I very quickly found one of my partners in crime, Alistair Curtis, who is the former head of design for Nokia, and he and I created design principles. And we have 5 design principles. We don't talk about them very much in our company, but they're in the way we think about products every day. The second thing we really did was to re-envision what we're doing. We're no longer the peripherals company for PCs. We're going to peripheralize. We're going to enable any cloud service. So that's a big comment. But that was a big change for us. So once you say we can enable anything, you know, essentially a lot of what used to happen on your PC started to migrate up to the cloud. Now everybody knows it. So much is on the cloud now that there's so many things that we can do, and the world will be different. In this room or in this space, if you look around you, as innovative as it is, Marco, if you think about how few things are connected, what you're sitting on right now is not connected. The lights are not connected. The floor is not connected. The table's not connected. You're not connected, except for your phone. All those things will change. So everything here, all of us, will be connected to the internet in the future. And we won't be connected to the internet, we'll be connected on the cloud, and to some extent on some edge device, or edge computing device. And some of that will be in your clothes, everywhere else. So that means, if you think about it, there are going to be tens, hundreds, thousands, millions, billions of things connected that are not connected today. And that is going to be an explosion of new categories that are peripherals to the cloud. So we view all that as our possible domain, and then we have to pick which ones we want to go into. And we're going to pick those based on where we think we can win, where we can be the leader. So that's really the second big change. Design thinking and doing, I won't talk about much. Now, that's the path we've been on. You've seen the results. I'm going to change gear completely. And I'll give you a chance to ask questions about anything before then, but I want to talk about something different. Scaling. This is really a hot topic in Silicon Valley. It's a hot topic here, actually, because as Marco described the space, one of the roles of this space is to bring in companies that are beyond the very, very early seed stage and help them become scalable. And so I spent my whole career at big companies. And I'm going to say something that, I'm a little uncomfortable saying in this audience, but I'll say it anyway. I learned that I hate big companies. I hate all big companies, including ours. And the reason I hate them is because they wind up creating bureaucracy and politics, and they become slow, and your title matters more than what you do. What you do should matter a whole lot more than your title. So I worked in pretty big companies, very big companies, ones that you would know, Procter & Gamble, General Electric, Whirlpool, and I just reached the conclusion that I don't want to be part of that. I don't want to foster that anymore. I've had enough. I'm going on strike. I'm going to protest, and we're going to change. And so I didn't say that to everybody when I came into Logitech, but that's how I felt. I felt as strongly about that as I did about design. And I wasn't sure what to do, and I'm still not sure exactly what to do, but I'll give you a story. But I was sure that I wasn't going to do what I've done before. So that was the starting point for this, what's now in this presentation. I will tell you right now, what's in this presentation, I'm learning every day, just like you are. And so this is 51% right, and 49% I'm not sure. Okay, but I'll tell you anyway. So what is that? The reason why I created this chart is because I have this. I've spent the last 7 years doing something that I'd never done before. A little bit like what Marco's doing. I spent the last 7 years meeting with a lot of startups. I mean, a lot of startups. I started very early. I'm not really sure why I started in the beginning. I think because I moved to Silicon Valley and there was so much discussion of startups, I felt left out because I'd never been in a startup. I'd never even really acquired a startup, and I wouldn't know what it was like. So I started meeting one-on-one with founders. Roll forward 7 years, 8 years, I've met with over 5,000. I'm addicted. I learned that a good small company does things so much better than a good big company. And in fact, the irony, and I'm sure Joseph will agree with this, the irony is when you get to the stage where you're a big company, I'm standing in front of, often, people like at Rise, who are actually founders of companies who are running small startups. And if they're running their startup well, they have a lot more to teach me than I have to teach them. But tomorrow I'll be on a panel discussing what brilliant things I'm doing, or we're doing. So what I concluded is, I want to learn from these startups. That's where the action is. So I started learning, and learning, and now I've come to a different conclusion. Now I really want to try to figure out how to create a company of small teams, because I think that's where the future is for companies like us. And you'll hear more about that in a second. Now this is the traditional structure, and so you've got individual contributors, you've got managers, you've got directors, and often senior directors. You've got vice presidents, sometimes junior vice presidents, senior vice presidents. You've got executives, and often you have, or usually you have the thing called the famous C-suite. These are like semi-gods. They're almost God, but they're not quite. And then there's God at the top, like Joseph and I are. And so God is all-knowing. God makes no mistakes. Nobody questions God, because God is always right. And this is a terrible model. Now, there's another model that people use, which is this. And if this looks familiar, it's because we just flipped this thing upside down. And in this model, the individual contributors, the people closest to the customer, closest to the outside world suppliers, they are the ones in charge, kind of. And then the customers are all up top. And then you've got managers, directors, vice presidents, the almost gods, and then God himself here serving everybody else. And this one is, in a way, you know, in most companies, this is the same thing as the prior chart, just described differently. I think there are some companies that really do that differently, but most companies it's the same. So this is called servant leadership. So my view, which I will admit is 51% baked, is that this is interesting. Because this is the Chicago Mercantile Exchange. This is a little bit like Rise going on across the street. This is complete chaos. I mean, if you look at that, this is a photograph by a guy named Andreas Gursky, who's a famous art photographer. This is a total mess, or is it? And so, the more I've thought about this, the more I remember growing up. I grew up in a small town in Kentucky. Kentucky puts out more than Kentucky Fried Chicken. And I grew up in that small town, and my mom and dad divorced when I was very young. I was about 10. So I grew up with my mom, basically, and I grew up with 3 siblings, 2 older brothers and a younger sister. And that table is not exactly the same, but it's very similar to the dining room, to the kitchen table, where we every night sat and did our homework. And when we did our homework there, I now look back on that and think, wow, that was amazing. Because at that table, my older brother was doing calculus. My younger sister was probably learning something. Even if I wasn't talking to him, I was overhearing something that he was saying to my mother, who was helping him with math. And my sister was asking me questions about how to spell. And that learning environment was amazing, really amazing. And it was 5 people, sometimes 4, sometimes 3. So I fell in love with this idea of small teams at a very early age. And I've been fixated on teams ever since, especially small teams. And I love small teams, and I believe in small teams. So that's been the model for me. So that made me think, what is a small team? What's a great small team? You know, I know small teams are where it goes. You know, you feel it. You know, in your work every day, you work with a small group of people, and when it's really working, you know that small teams are the way to go. The bigger the team, the slower, the more bureaucratic, the more political. So, you know small teams are good. Well, what's the smallest team you can have? I mean, I don't need to tell you, it's on the screen. It's 2 people. Because if you're by yourself, you're not a team. Sorry. Unless you have a split personality. Which you could. But for most people, the smallest team you can have is 2 people. And the reason the smallest team you can have is 2 people is mathematical, because in a small team like that, you have 1 relationship. And that's also the reason why a relationship of 2 is actually quite easy to manage. If you think about it, if I meet you for the first time, we'll do a mental thought experiment. I meet you, you and I meet for the first time, even if I already know you, and we shake hands. Just imagine that for a second. Now Joseph and I and you meet for the first time, and we shake hands. Now think about that for a minute. The first one's really easy. The second one gets a little fuzzy. Do I shake Joseph's hand first? Or Bracken's hand first? And what's the other person doing? The truth is, when you go from if you just go from 2 to 3, we'll stay here for a second, you automatically lose something, right? It gets a little blurry. So teams of 2 are super effective. Now, there are a lot of great teams of 2. You know, I put a few up here, but there's, I always joke and put Adam and Eve up here. They were super productive. And then there's Steve Jobs and Wozniak. By the way, you can stay on Steve Jobs for a while, because Steve Jobs and Wozniak. There's Steve Jobs and Tim Cook. There's Steve Jobs and Jonathan Ive. There's Steve Jobs and Maureen Jobs. You can have lots of partners in a single life, and even at the same time. I put Barack and Michelle, because when I first put this together, you know, he was still in charge. Orville Noble Wright. Anybody? How many people here know who the Wright Brothers were? Okay. Well, those of you who don't. So the Wright Brothers, officially in the U.S. anyway, created the first plane that flew. and it flew for about 150 meters, I think. But those two were also an interesting pair because they would have these incredible debates. They were a startup. They would have these incredible debates between each other, uncomfortably arguing with each other, to the point where the people in the room with them would be like embarrassed. You know, if you've ever been around people who are really fighting, they would be really embarrassed, and they'd almost want to leave the room. Then lunchtime would come, when they'd stop, and they'd go into the breakfast area, or lunch area. They'd have lunch together, they'd laugh, they'd joke. They'd go back, and Orville would take Wilbur's position in the last argument, and Wilbur would take Orville's, and they would finish the debate. And they had an incredible result, which is they were the first ones to get a plane in the air and sustain it. I put other people up here who don't have to go through. So why is two as a team so good? It's because there's just one relationship. It goes back to that, you meeting me, or you meeting me and Joseph. It's just clear. And you know you got one person accountable, and you got one person that you're talking to. If you have three people, and three of you talking, somebody's an audience all the time, right? All the time. So that's, I'm not intending to tell you to only meet with people one-on-one, because that wouldn't make any sense, or to have teams of only two. That doesn't make sense either. But I want you to think about it. So when you go to three, what happens to the number of relationships? It triples. It doesn't double, it triples. And if you go to five, just add two more people, it more than triples again. So this is a small team. This is a team that's my dining room table. Look how many pairs there are here. How many relationships? This is only 5 people. Let's add more. This is 16 people. 16 people are 120 different relationships. 120. I mean, if 3 people made you go a little slow, that's staggering. Whoops. Okay, so I'm going to get to the punchline here, which is, and then I'm going to open this up for questions. So my conclusion is that you can't have teams of 2 for everything. It's impossible. So, and it is good to have small teams. I think I was right, and I still feel like I'm right. The small teams are really where the action is. You get as small as you can. Sometimes you can't have a team of 5. Sometimes you need a team of 8. Sometimes you maybe need a team of 16. But park all that for a minute. Put that aside. The most important part of this message is probably, maybe it'll be obvious to you now, is this. It doesn't matter what the team size is. You're always only operating in pairs. Whether you're on a team of 2 or you're on a team of 16, you're always operating in pairs in every part of your life, whether it's with somebody you're working with at work, or several people you're working with at work, or in your personal life, or in your marriage, or whatever it is, you're always in pairs. So once that light goes on for you, you know, the cool thing about removing layers, this is to me the biggest benefit of removing layers, which you can't do everywhere. So please don't think that I think, you know, everybody should have, you know, 27 direct reports. If you are able to do it, which I've evolved my personal way to that, if you have 27 direct reports or 25 direct reports, if you think about it, how many one-on-ones a week do you think I have with those direct reports? How much direction do you think I'm giving my direct reports? Not much. So when you do delayer, if you're really aggressively delayer, you have to have great people, period. You have to have great, independent, strong, high EQ, high IQ people. And luckily, I do. So I have a phenomenal team. But that's unusual, and it's the first time in my career I've been able to go to that. I tried it early in my career. I tried to have, I had a guy that I had about 40 direct reports, all doing the same thing basically. It was a service operation. And it almost killed him and almost blew up the organization. So it was really a screw up on my part. And I learned there that you can't do it if you don't have the right people. So the delayering thing, I think, is a good idea. I think these are complementary, the concept of delayering and the concept of, but sort of, I wouldn't relate them directly, because this is a different kind of organization. It's not taking out the senior vice president layer. It's changing the structure of the whole company. It's a little different. Okay. Next question. Yes?
When you have so many small teams, how do you foster a competition, competitiveness without creating a lot of different silos over time?
You know, I think the best thing about small teams, like we're trying to do it, and I'll remind you, I'm not pretending that this is a proven model, right? And I think the best thing about that is, if you have small business teams, the thing that drives their innovation and their desire for change or for improvement is not each other, it's the customer. And so they're very fixated on their customer. You know, that's the kind of, I wouldn't call that competitive really, although they're competitive with other people trying to serve that customer in the same way, it's the same thing. But it's not inside your company. So I really don't think internal competition is a big deal. Now I will say you're speaking, you're making that comment to somebody who's running the company who, you know, I mean, if somebody in Logitech stood up here, Jean-Marc, and said, you know, I'm not getting the resources I need because I think it's going to somebody else because I'm not doing a good enough job getting attention. You know, I can imagine that politics can come right back in again. So it's hard. You know, I think you've got to always be scared to death of the politics and the bureaucracy. And I don't have anything against internal competition unless it becomes corrosive and causes too much internal focus. So it's okay to have a little internal competition. You know, you should have you should want to be performing at a level that your peers are. But if it gets too severe, it's bad. And so I'm not really focused on trying to create that at all. In fact, I'd like to minimize that. I'm very fixated on trying to make sure that people, that our business teams especially, are very focused on customer needs and what we can do to satisfy them. Yes?
I'm always pro small team, and I have only been working with small teams no more than 5 people. I really like this idea, but I'm not sure how is the most effective way to structure a small team.
Yeah.
Is that a cross-function or the same function? For instance, there's a team of 3 or 5. You probably have different functionality, but then somebody can become bottleneck. Versus you have the same function, everybody doing the same thing, but then you've lost the elasticity to be able to stretch and then cover more scope. So right now I'm kind of struggling which is a better way of organizing.
It's an interesting comment. I think it depends on what you're doing. Yeah, I think there are small teams that are cross-functional. Most of our business teams are very cross-functional. So they'd have somebody from finance, somebody from design, somebody from product management. So it's super cross-functional. The other teams that would have 5 people, 4 or 5 people in the same function, and they're largely doing the same thing. So our procurement teams, but they're calling on different, they're representing different either suppliers or, and I think both of those can work personally. I think it just depends on what the needs are of the business unit and the team. So I don't think it's an either or. That's my opinion. Your opinion is as good as mine. Other questions? Yes.
Yes, I have one. Actually, I'll move on to the innovation. At the beginning of the show, you talk about the 10-year discussion about the keyboard before you finally launch. I'm quite curious, what's the tipping point of the discussion among the team that finally will try the keyboard? And what would you do? And what the company did back then?
Well, in 1998, I was long before I joined the company, so I wasn't privy to the discussions. Actually, so there's probably somebody here who may have known more than I did. I think they knew they needed to. You know, if a company gets, you know, Lee & Fung's a good example. I mean, has entered several new businesses over its life, many new businesses over its life. And I think with a company, with any company, usually if you're successful, the thing that gets you the first big wave of success, sooner or later, loses energy. Maybe not because of you, like it's because of the market. So you know you got to do something different. And the question is, when do you bite the bullet and do it? Most startups, you know, 20 years ago would go relatively slowly because the world was moving more slowly. Now I think if you're in a lot of startups today, they're already thinking about the second and third one, maybe too fast, you know, before the time's right. In our case, in 1998, I think we had a leadership change, so a new CEO came in. This product had already been developed underneath the old leader, but I think it scared him. I think in a way, it was probably good that he left because I think he might not have been aggressive enough, and the new leader was bold because he didn't know any better. A little bit like me when I came in 7 years ago. You know, my chairman, who was that leader in 1998 to 2008, he always says to me, you know, when I bring something aggressive, he always says, "I'm so glad you're here because I'm a chicken." And what he means is I'm scared. You know, what you're doing scares me. And I think that it does, you know, when you've been in your job a while, the problem is that things do start to scare you. And it's a dangerous place to be. You know, I'll tell a quick story. So, and a lot of people probably already know this, but after I've been in my job for about 5 years, every year I evaluate myself in the month of December, and I give myself a review, and then I score myself, and then I set my goals for the next year. I did that, and then in January I really thought, was I tough enough? And I thought, you know, I even wonder if I'm the right guy or right person, man or woman, for the next 5 years, because we've changed so much in the last 5 years. And I believe we need to change more in the next 5 years than we have in the last 5 years. So, am I the right person? So I said, okay, if we were going to go recruit on the outside for a new person, what would it look like? I kind of wrote that down and made bullet points. And then I said, okay, how do I look compared to that? I thought, you know, I look pretty good. I mean, I would certainly make the interview slate. You know? But I have a big disadvantage, a huge disadvantage, which is I was involved in all the strategy decisions, the strategy, the people, the products. Almost every decision, I either was directly involved in it or I was part of it somehow. And so I have this huge disadvantage. Can I really be objective for a company that's going to be more different 5 years from now than it is today? And I'm the one who brought us from, or helped bring us from where we were 5 years ago to today. Am I the right person? So there's a real paradox, you know. On the one hand, I'm probably a good person to be in the job. On the other hand, I'm the wrong person, exactly the wrong person to be in the job. So I decided I'm going to fire myself. So I did. So I fired myself it was a Monday night. I fired myself, and I learned a few years ago, sleep on every decision. So I said, I'm going to fire myself, and I'm going to go to bed. And then tomorrow morning, I'll decide what to do. Do we go hire somebody else or what? So I went to bed that night. I woke up the next morning, and as often is the case for me, and I'm sure it's the same for you, it's really smart to sleep on decisions, big ones. I woke up the next morning, and it was totally clear to me what to do. I need to rehire myself under one condition, and the condition is no sacred cows. Nothing, no person, no strategy, no product, nothing is sacred. Nothing that I've done before. And while that's awfully hard to do, it was very liberating for me. So, you know, I think that concept of always trying to figure out how to reinvent yourself. I'm actually just within the next 24 hours, I think I'm going to put a blog out on this on LinkedIn on this concept. It's bigger than that concept, but the concept of I call it getting back to zero or zero-ness. It's reinvention. And can you reinvent yourself regularly? You know, Joseph, I guarantee you Joseph's been the same place I am, because all of us who've been doing our jobs for a while, and many of you, can you reinvent yourself regularly, every 5 years? And the next question is, if you could do that, and by the way, not just in your job, could be anywhere in your life. Next question is, can you reinvent yourself every 3 years? Do you need to? Every year? Can you reinvent yourself every 6 months or every month? Could you potentially get back to zero and reinvent yourself all the time and see objectively all the time? I don't know if that's possible, but that seems like a worthy goal. And you know, as long as you're responsible, it doesn't seem dangerous to me. So I took your question a little farther than you intended, probably. Next question.
Bracken, can I make a comment?
Absolutely, please do, Jim. You want the?
No. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. By the way, thank you so much for that insightful presentation. As with any talk, the simplicity actually of your message is very alluring. I'd like to make comments on 2 points. The first one is the power of pair. So I have 17 direct reports in Lee & Co. So I manage
very much like me
as a sourcing company, and I manage also the logistics company. And while you like to establish the culture to guide the direction of the whole company, I manage the 17 in pairs. So every interaction, I just met Bracken today. Going back home, I have a T account. You understand finance, right? An account, T account. Debit, credit. So all the time, every single interaction never failed. I've done this for 20-something years. Did I add on to the emotional bank account of this relationship? And I cannot say that for more than 2. It has to be Bracken and me, John Mark and me, so it's 2. So that power of 2 is just so, it's real, it's powerful. When I go back and I'd like to evaluate how I have added or I've taken away from that bank account, it's through that record. Again, it's 2. The second thing about reinvention is, have you heard of a company called Pixar? Right? Ed Catmull was a co-founder. You know, Cars, Finding Nemo, and so forth and so on. One saying that, one of the things that Ed Catmull said, and exactly as what Bracken was sharing with you about reinvention, he was saying that failure is asymmetrical with respect to time. Failure is asymmetrical with respect to time. So what he's saying is that looking backwards, we always said that, you know what brought me here was all the failures I've made. Steve Jobs says that, Alibaba, Jack Ma said, one reason I'm here today is because of all the failures that I've made. So looking backward, failures brought me here. Looking forward, we do everything so as not to fail. So how do you reconcile the two? And that's exactly what Bracken was saying. You've got to start doing experimentation. Because right now, failure may be too costly. If you fail, the whole company may go down, but you've got to do regular experimentations. And this is one of the places, in fact, that we do experimentations. So think about that, try not to put the whole company at stake, but try to continually to reinvent through a lot of experimentation.
I love those. I love both comments. I want to tee off on your last one because I love it. So I think one of the things that I've come to the conclusion for myself is there are 2 words that you'd be better off. First of all, before I go there, the problem with failure, failure is really not a problem. The only time it's really a problem is if you don't manage the risk. So you have to imagine what's the worst thing that can happen, then you have to manage that, right? So that's what we didn't do during that period, that 4-year period where we were trying to do new things. We didn't manage the risk well, so we ended up getting in big trouble because we weren't managing risk. So we can come back to that if you want to in another question, but let me go back to the failure comment. I think there are 2 words, if we all could, eliminate from your vocabulary, it would be success and failure. Neither one of them is healthy. Failure is unhealthy for exactly the reason, because what is failure? Failure just means something didn't work. You just need to learn from it. It's an iterative process. Most things don't work. The few things that do work, great, but you often have to iterate your way, experiment your way to get to the things that work. So as long as you accept that, you don't care. The word failure should go away. It should just be, I'm experimenting. I'm trying something. I tried this, it didn't work. Here's what I learned. Success is even worse, because success, we're all trained to believe is good. And so you seek success. The problem is when you're successful, you end up building a reputation. You don't want to lose face. You don't want to be unsuccessful. So you're more hesitant to try new things. You get in a position they think I do this well, so you end up doing it less because you don't want to take any chances. So success is a really insidious, dangerous, terrible, I hate it, I don't even use the word except to say that I don't like it word. So if you could take both of them out and replace them both with learning, that would be good. Next question. Thank you, Joseph. Those were great. And I'm glad to hear you have 17 direct reports. I feel okay now.
What's your most 3 important pairs in your life?
If I were an audience with non-Logitech people, I would answer that. I have a lot more than 3, so I have a lot of important pairs. I'd say Kirsty, for those of you who don't know, Kirsty's my head of people and culture, which is what we call HR. She's really important in my work life. I would say, now I'm going to list a bunch, but I'm not going to put them in order or say that they're the most important, but I would say Brian Coe, who is our general counsel. who's our top lawyer, but he's a lot more than that, and so he's important. Alistair Curtis, who's the head of design, clearly important. But I would say Philippe, you know, I've got a lot, you know, and probably probably the broader the scope of your responsibilities, the more you might have in your job. In my personal life, I also have a lot. I won't go through those now, but I mean, I've got a ton, you know. Actually, my oldest son, ironically, is actually a very good pair for me. I've probably learned the reason we're so focused on gaming is because of him. And he doesn't, you know, he challenges the hell out of me. I mean, he's uncomfortably challenging, but he's really helpful. So I've got a bunch, really a bunch. Any other question? Next question. Yes.
When you took Logitech in a multi-category, multi-brand direction, what are the kind of challenges you faced, essentially from the inertia of the old Logitech?
Yeah, I think this could probably go on for a while, but I'll focus on a couple. I think one is when you're trying new things. They're small. So by definition, when you try to go into something new, unless you bought a big company or something, you'd be going into something smaller than what you're already in. And so your tendency, though, especially if you're in Joseph's or my job, is to say to the people who are running the existing businesses, okay, we're going to try something new, and then you agree on what to try, and then they report into the same person. Sometimes you have to do that, but if it's really something different, like a new category, I've learned that you need to separate it. You need to separate the thing from the existing business. And the reason for that is it's like gravity. You know, the bigger the organization, the more gravity it has. And so if you're creating something that's really different from the big organization, it will get sucked into the gravity of the large one. I'll give you an example. And I'll use names here. No, I won't actually. I hired an entrepreneur, and I like hiring entrepreneurs because they come in, they're decisive, they go, they just do stuff, and then they make mistakes, and they apologize later, and they don't ask permission, so it doesn't work. And I hired a guy who was an entrepreneur. He came into the company. He hadn't worked in hardware. He was totally software. And so I wanted that because the new business area I wanted him to work in was an experience that would include hardware, but it was really more about the software. So I brought him in. I said, we agreed on what he was going to do. He got super excited. He was off into the race, making decisions, boom, boom, boom. I was meeting with him every 3 weeks. About 9 weeks in, at light speed, after 3 meetings, I walk in the room, and there's a room. The room had 2 big tables in it. And there were these things on the table, like 8 things on the table, covered in this beautiful cloth. Each one had like a really nice satin cloth over it. So clearly something was hidden. And so you could tell he was excited. So I walk in the room, he says, okay, today you're going to see what I've been working on. So he unveils the first one. It's a prototype of the product. Then he unveils the second one. It's a next generation prototype of the product. And the third one, and the fourth one. And he got to the 8th one. And I was so upset, I couldn't even think. So he finished. I said, Vincent, look, I don't want to make you stand. I don't want you to feel terrible. I said, but do you realize that I brought you in so that you wouldn't do what we do? And you did exactly what we do. You went straight to the hardware first. And you didn't even work at the company. And he reported to me. And the reason why I'm telling you this story is because breaking gravity is so hard. It's just, so, you know, that's a case where, you know, so the more independent you can make it, the better, the more you have to remind them all the time. I think that's the biggest one that I would say, boy, when you're trying to do new things, get them separated, give them separate budgets, not too much, give them not enough money. So they're keeping you involved, you know. Yes?
Given your experience working in big companies, I just want to ask your thoughts about incentivizing for innovation, because different companies have different approaches. Some support incentivizing, some don't. So do you have personal thoughts on that? Or if you agree, then what would be the right approach and structure?
Well, every bone in my body says that there are lots of right answers here. You know, we're experimenting with some things right now. On the one hand, and I have to make sure. You know, one of the things I do with myself, and I've been doing it since I joined Logitech, is sometimes the answer, I'm a very intuitive person, so sometimes the answer to your question or to a problem just is in my head immediately, you know. And then I stop myself and I say, okay, no, I'm going to really think through this logically, usually with my pairs or with 3 or 4 people. Let me really think through this logically. And then I feel like we got to an answer. If we get to that answer, and it's exactly what we did at one of the big companies I worked in before, I immediately say, okay, we got to start over again. This is the wrong answer. So we go back again, we think through it again, and once in a while you get to the same answer. So in this compensation area, I don't know what the right answer is. On the one hand, if you're in a big company, your tendency is to say, we should all be trading on the same currency. You know, whether it's Logitech stock or a base bonus scenario. On the other hand, that doesn't make sense to me. For a new business that you might have brought somebody in from the outside to create, and they're a hungry entrepreneur who want to create disproportionate value. So I don't know what the answer is. I will tell you, and the Logitech people don't know this, we are experimenting right now with alternative models. If you ask me that in 2 or 3 years, I'll probably give a better answer. But I would say, you know, whatever people are doing is probably smart, because I don't think anybody really has this figured out yet. Next question.
Hey, so just put your hands together. Right? Again, super rare. And then we finally, you know, Joseph talked a little bit about, you know, failure. Bracken kind of piggybacked on that a little bit. As so many HKUST MBA students in the audience, and also this, especially for the current students, in the MBA, it's a great opportunity to try anything and everything that you always wanted to, because you can get immediate feedback from a diverse group of classmates, and it's a safe place. So for current students, try things, don't be afraid of failure. From a Explorium perspective, we fail here all the time actually, but we don't call it failure, we just call it pivoting, and we call it learning. So another thing is, you know, as part of this continuous improvement process, please fill out your cards. Okay? Give us some good comments on how we can improve.